You ever have one of those moments where you just stop, stare, and think, oh no, they messed with the wrong person? That was me, standing in my backyard, coffee still in hand, staring at what used to be my pride and joy, now reduced to a pile of splintered wood, nails bent like twisted paper clips, lying in the dirt at the edge of the lake. It wasn't just a structure, it was my bridge. Let me explain. I lived just outside the reach of the local HOA, close enough to see their perfect lawns and matching mailboxes, far enough to enjoy my own little slice of freedom. My property runs right to the edge of a small stream that feeds into the lake. Years ago, I decided to build a small wooden bridge there. Nothing huge, nothing fancy, but solid and beautiful in its own rustic way. Every plank, cut and sanded by me. Every nail, hammered in with my own two hands. I spent weekends staining it so it could withstand the weather, and I even carved a small design into the side, my initials and the year I built it. It wasn't just functional, it was personal. That bridge connected my backyard to a quiet trail on the other side of the stream. It was where my kids used to run across to play in the woods, where my dog would wait for me during morning walks, where I'd stand at sunset and watch the light shimmer across the lake. But apparently, not everyone appreciated my handiwork. When I stepped outside that morning and saw the destruction, I thought maybe a storm had taken it out during the night. But the weather had been calm. That's when I noticed something odd. Clean cuts on the wood, like from a chainsaw, and a few yards away, muddy tire tracks from some heavy equipment. I followed them, and sure enough, they led right back toward the HOA community. Before I could even go knock on someone's door, I got my answer. One of my neighbors, who doesn't exactly get along with the HOA either, came walking over with a look on his face like he had bad news to deliver. "You didn't hear," he said. "The HOA decided your bridge was unsightly. Said it ruined the view from the waterfront homes. So they sent a crew to remove it this morning. No warning, no notice, just came and tore it down." At first, I just stood there, shocked, stunned. Then the shock turned to anger. A hot, burning kind of anger that sits in your chest and makes your hands shake. They thought they could just roll onto my property, destroy something I built with my own hands, and walk away like nothing happened? They had no idea who they were dealing with. That's when I decided if they wanted war, I'd give them war. And trust me, I was going to win. When I say the HOA president was named Karen, I'm not just being dramatic. Her name was actually Karen, and she was every bit the stereotype. The kind of woman who measures her grass with a ruler, sends you passive-aggressive emails about your Christmas lights, and somehow thinks she's in charge of the entire neighborhood, even the part she doesn't own. Karen had been gunning for my bridge for a while, but I never thought she'd have the audacity to touch it. Turns out, I underestimated just how entitled she was. Her official reason? The bridge ruined the view for the waterfront mansions across the lake. Now, let me paint you a picture. My property is tucked away at the far end of the lake, where a narrow stream flows out into the woods. My little bridge was barely visible from most spots, unless you were really looking for it. But those $7 million waterfront homeowners? They like their view perfect. Pristine lawns, matching boat docks, symmetrical landscaping like a magazine cover. The HOA saw my hand-built wooden bridge as an eyesore in a curated postcard image. Never mind that it wasn't even on their property. Never mind that I kept it in good condition, and it blended naturally with the trees. Nope, it wasn't luxury enough for them. When I confronted Karen later, she didn't even try to sugarcoat it. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "This is a private lake. We have to maintain standards." That's when I almost laughed out loud. Private lake? No, ma'am, not even close. Here's the thing they didn't want to admit. This private lake is actually part of a managed water system. It's fed by a dam about a mile upstream. That dam doesn't just keep the lake looking nice. It controls the water level for the entire area, including their fancy waterfront docks. And here's the real kicker. I knew the guy who owned that dam. Not just in passing. We've been fishing buddies for years. I've helped him with maintenance. We've swapped tools. We've had beers by the campfire. So while Karen thought she was flexing her HOA power by tearing down my bridge, She had no idea she just picked a fight with someone who had a direct connection to the one person who could make or break her perfect little lake. As she walked away from that conversation, smug as ever, I already had my next move forming in my head. If the HOA wanted to destroy something I built on my land, maybe it was time for me to adjust something they relied on. And lucky for me, I knew exactly where to start. The morning after I saw my bridge in splinters, I couldn't stop thinking about payback. Not the petty kind, not some Facebook post or legal letter. No, I wanted something big. Something that would make Karen and her HOA feel exactly what it's like when someone messes with what's yours. That's when it hit me. The dam. I pulled out my phone and called up my buddy Mark, the man who owned the dam upstream. Mark's a good guy, old school, the kind who believes in handshakes and keeping your word. We'd spent years fishing together, fixing things, and talking about how ridiculous the HOA folks were. When I told him what happened, he let out this long whistle. Well, he said, I've been thinking about selling this place and moving to Florida anyway. If you can match my asking price, I'll sell it to you today. Now, I'm not going to lie, it was a lot of money. The kind of amount that makes you think twice, maybe even 3 times. But then I picture my bridge smashed into a heap by people who had no right to touch it. I thought about Karen's smug little smile when she told me they were maintaining standards. And I realized this wasn't just about revenge. This was about making sure they never pulled something like this again. 1 week later, the paperwork was signed. Just like that, I was a proud owner of the dam, the one thing keeping the HOA's $7 million waterfront dream alive. Without that dam holding the water level, their docks would sit in mud, their boats would be useless, and their picture-perfect lakefront would look more like a swampy ditch. But I didn't say a word. Oh no, I played it cool. I waited, patiently. And then, one hot summer morning, I drafted an official letter to the HOA board. Subject: Scheduled maintenance notification. Dear homeowners, due to routine safety inspections and necessary maintenance, the dam will be temporarily drained to perform essential repairs. Thank you for your understanding. The owner. I hit send and waited. It took 10 minutes. My phone rang, and when I answered, I swear I could hear Karen's blood pressure spiking through the line. She was practically shrieking. You can't do that. You'll ruin the lake. The property values will. I cut her off, calm as you like. Care of my property. My dam. My rules. There was a long pause, the kind of silence where you know the other person is realizing they've just stepped into the deep end without a life jacket. And for the first time since they destroyed my bridge, I felt that deep, satisfying calm of knowing the real fun was just about to start. The draining started like a whisper, barely noticeable at first. On day 1, the water line dipped just a few inches. Nothing dramatic yet. By the next morning, though, it was impossible to ignore. The shoreline crept farther and farther from the docks, exposing muddy banks that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Ducks waddled confusedly where water used to be. And then came the real drop. Within 48 hours, the once glittering lake, the HOA's pride and joy, looked like a scene from a disaster movie. The $1 million view? Gone. In its place was a giant muddy crater. Docks had stranded on dry land like awkward wooden skeletons. Pontoon boats leaned on their sides like beach whales. Fish flopped desperately in shallow puddles, and the stench of wet, rotting algae filled the air. That's when the neighbors started coming out. They stood there in their designer sunglasses and silk bathrobes, clutching coffee mugs, staring in disbelief. Some shouted across the lake, demanding answers. Others whipped out their phones, calling the county, the state, anyone who would listen. But here's the thing. I had every legal right. The dam was private property, and draining it for maintenance and safety inspections was perfectly within my rights as the owner. I even had permits for the work, just to make sure no one could touch me legally. Every time someone called to complain, I'd politely explain, I'm just doing essential upkeep. Wouldn't want the dam to fail and flood your homes, right? And just to add a little poetic justice, I got to work on something special. While the HOA's lake shriveled to nothing, I installed a brand new bridge over my stream. Not just a replacement, an upgrade, wider, sturdier, and with a polished finish that gleamed in the sun. A bridge so beautiful that it made my old one look like a popsicle stick project. I made sure it was in full view from the waterfront mansions. Every time they looked out their windows at the muddy crater, they also got a perfect view of the bridge they destroyed, now reborn, bigger and better than ever. It was psychological warfare, and it worked. Within a week, the HOA called an emergency meeting. They sent me a formal letter begging me to refill the lake. Then Karen herself called, her voice dripping with desperation. We're prepared to rebuild your bridge, exactly how you want it, at no cost to you. All we ask is that you restore the community's beauty. I'll be honest, I almost laughed out loud. The bridge was already standing, stronger than ever, and they didn't even know it yet. But I wasn't done. Oh no, this wasn't just about a bridge anymore. This was about respect, and making sure the HOA learned that when you push the wrong person, you better be ready for flood, or in this case, the drought. I told them I'd refill the lake, but not for free. I made it crystal clear. I'll restore your precious view under one condition, a signed, legally binding agreement that the HOA will never, under any circumstances, interfere with my property again. No fines, no standards, no stepping foot on my land without my permission, ever. At first, they tried to play tough. Karen called me with that fake sweet voice, saying, "We can discuss your concerns, maybe reach a mutual understanding." But every single day the lake stayed dry, the pressure mounted. Property values were plummeting. Potential buyers were walking away from sales because the waterfront homes didn't have water. Local gossip spread like wildfire, and the finger was pointing squarely at the HOA board. It wasn't just me they were dealing with anymore. It was a growing mob of angry, wealthy homeowners who saw their investment sinking faster than the lake level. Finally, after 2 miserable weeks, Karen called again. No sweetness this time, just a clipped, tired tone. "We'll sign." Within hours, we met at a lawyer's office. Every HOA board member was there, looking like they hadn't slept in days. I sat across the table, calm as ever, while they slid the papers over to me. The agreement was ironclad. If the HOA so much as thought about touching my property again, they'd be paying me damages. And it wasn't just the bridge, it covered everything I owned. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but when I signed, I couldn't help but smile. The war was officially over, and I'd won. That afternoon, I drove to the dam and began opening the gates. The water surged forward, pouring into the lake bed. It was slow at first, but by the next day, the shoreline crept back to the docks. The boats floated once more. The fish returned to deeper waters, and the HOA breathed a collective sigh of relief. From a distance, it almost looked like nothing had happened. Almost, because while the lake had been restored, something else had changed. Permanently. Karen can't even look me in the eye now. If she's out walking her little designer dog, and I'm coming down the sidewalk, she crosses the street. If she spots me in the grocery store, she turns and leaves. The once smug HOA queen now avoids me like plague. And my bridge? Oh, it's still standing. Stronger than ever. Every plank polished. Every bolt tight. A quiet monument to the day I proved a point. Lesson learned? Never destroy something that doesn't belong to you. Especially when the person you mess with holds the power to take everything you value, with nothing more than the turn of a valve.